Hello friends, Tanya here with another fun video. Today let's talk about using our fancy elegant dies to create whimsical cards. I am going to be using several dies from the Beautiful Sentiments release from Spellbinders. Here are two of them. I have 4 of the 8 products from this release. This is the Romantic Chargeour dies and the Heartfelt Thanks Vignette dies. And then next we've got the Forever in Our Memory vignette dies, which really make me think of a cloche, if you know what I'm talking about, that beautiful glass covering that they put over fancy pastries, etc. We also have the Birthday Wishes vignette dies, and then on to the ones that I don't own, we have the Happy Anniversary vignette and the Bless Your Heart vignette, which are also a lovely die cut sentiment that is an addition to the different layers that you can create. And each of these die sets has several layers that you can use in a bunch of combinations and create so many different looks. I love these super versatile dies. And one of the things I love about them most is that they are sized to fit a 5x7 card, which, if you've been watching me for very long, you know is my favorite card size to create with. Next, we have the lovely Petite Floral Potpourri dies and the beautiful Inside and Out Sentiments Clear stamp sets, or stamp set. These are all created to work together, and they all look very elegant. But we're going to take that elegant look and go a little further and use it to create some whimsical cards with the June 2021 Card of the Month kit called Wild Hello. So let's get started. I was very inspired by this cloche looking die piece, and I wanted to create a card with a cupcake or a cake or something else that really looked like it belonged under one of those cloches. I do not use the sentiments on any of these cards that are included in the die set, but you certainly could. I am going to take the biggest solid piece from that die combination and create this background. I am also taking some Distress Oxide inks here. I believe that's I think that's Scattered Straw, Kitsch Flamingo, and Salvage Patina. And this is a great combination to create a soft pastel background. I do go back and forth working that a little bit to blend that, and I will get a little purple and a little orange between those two sets of colors, or those 3 sets of colors. I do add a little bit of sparkle using some pearlized water and some of this liquid pixie dust. I do keep one spot in this little paint palette just for liquid pixie dust because it is easy to reconstitute with water after it dries out, and then you don't waste any of it. I'm going to trim a little bit off of this ephemera piece so that I can make it sit right along the bottom of that die cut, the delicate part. I had die cut that with some shimmery white cardstock using 3 of the dies. Now I'm taking a piece of white cardstock, I think it's an 8-pound Nina Solar White, that I die cut with the outline or the biggest frame die from probably Wistful Windows. Either that or Deco Bloom. They both have the same size and shape. And I had squished out some of each of those inks that we'd ink blended with earlier onto my craft mat and add a little water to it to make it into some spatter. And I'm just spattering it all over this background to help coordinate. I'm also going to add a little bit of liquid pixie dust to this also. I do really like how this turned out and really coordinated with the whole card feeling. Now I'm going to add another layer of cardstock behind the shimmery white cardstock here, and I cut these both out at the same time you do want to make all of the die cuts at once when you are going to layer like this, because every time you disassemble your different layers of die cuts, it will go back together just a slight different way because they are separate pieces. I'm just using my Barely Arts Precision Glue here to add glue to the back of this so we can add it to the ink blended portion. And you mainly want to get around your outer edges and your inner edges, and then in some random spots with some dots. You don't have to worry about getting glue on every single spot. And you have to work pretty quickly, because by the time you get back to where you started, a lot of times that has started to dry. I'm going to put a heavy block over that for just a minute here to let that set. And we're going to add some of our other pieces to this. I'm adding some coaster blank behind part of this little flag banner here so that it will be flush when we adhere it to our piece here, because there's layers there. I did use the stamp set from the card kit of the month also. It's got a lot of great sentiments and images. I am really enjoying this stamp set. I'm just going to run my finger over that to condition the stamp a little bit before I use it. And I use my anti-static powder tool because I'm going to heat emboss this. I'm using Versamark ink, and I will use a couple of layers and just gently pushing down. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I don't want to squish the lines of that fine sentiment. Using some, I think that was brass. It was either brass or gold from Hero Arts, and I think it was the gold. And I am going to die cut this with a sentiment banner from, I think that's Everyday Sentiments 2. I'll have to take a look. I'll have it linked in the description box below. I do often just dig through my stash to find a banner that'll work with whatever sentiment I'm trying to die cut. I do not do well using my trimmer to create sentiment banners, so I do really rely on these dies. I'm doing a little partial die cutting here where I had lined up the first side and die cut partially by laying the plates over this, over the areas that I want to cut only. I did get this off just a smidge, but I don't think anyone's going to notice. I just trimmed off that extra hair of paper. And now we're going to adhere that to the other elements of our card. I keep laying these all out to make sure I am progressing in the design style that I want. I'm also going to stamp the coordinating or the inside sentiment on a piece of cardstock, and I want to heat emboss this also. When I'm heat embossing for the inside of the card, I will sometimes do it directly on the card base, but I don't like the warping that can occur with heat embossing on the card base. So I typically will do it on a separate piece to adhere inside. I was also showing you that I spattered the envelope and the inside of the card the same way that I did the front of the card to have some consistency and follow through in the whole design. I found these cute balloons in the ephemera pack, and I adhered the sentiment over the top of the strings. Now we're going to add the back panel, the one that was all spattered and die cut, to the front of the card. The die from the Wistful Windows and the Deco Bloom die sets both cut it out about, I think it's like 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. It's a very small border left on the underside of that. Now I'm going to add the rest of the pieces that we are going to create our scene with. I did add a little bit of coaster blank behind that cake and have that sitting just on the bottom edge of that frame that we've die cut. I'm going to hang the banner from the sentiment banner, all the banner, banner. And then we're going to adhere that to the top of this cloche And it really is the look I was looking for. Just going to put the heavy block on top. And then I decided I wanted some sparkly confetti falling down around the cake. So I took all of these Color Essential gems and I took the tiniest of the gems in each color, and each pack has two versions of the color. I've got the gold, the silver, and the crystal mix, and I'm just using one of each of these different colors. So there's 6 little tiny gems, and then I think I threw a few more in to keep the balance and the fullness of the confetti falling down around the cake. It really does add to this design. You could do this with sequins or other gems, whatever you have handy. I just happen to have these gems. I've had these gems for a few months now, and whenever I use them, I tend to think I've overused them because I use a ton of them, but I still have a ton of these gems left. I'm telling you, they're pretty good value. And that is this card completed. We'll move on to the second card. We're going to use the Heartfelt Thanks Vignette die set, which has this elongated oval with some fancy detail above and below. We're going to use those 2 papers out of the Wild Hello paper pad from the June 2021 card kit. I've taken the outer frame and the next 2 dies, because the one cuts the detail for the top and the bottom and the other cuts the oval out, and created that frame out of some silver shimmer. And then I used that other die to create the plastic sheet that's going to be part of our shaker. We're creating a shaker with this one. And then to cut the background, because that is going to fit behind the frame. And we're adding the same sentiment as we used on the first card. I believe it says, happiest wishes on your birthday. And I'm going to heat emboss that with silver embossing powder. This is an old bottle. I don't know about you, but my embossing powder will last and last and last. And I'm rediscovering some of my older ones and trying to use those as much as I can. I did do some ink blending on this panel, and to be honest, I'm not really happy with that. But the card is all assembled now. I can't undo it, and someone will love it. There's always someone that loves the card that I'm not happy with. This is how the background layers over the back. I did cut several layers of coaster blank with the dies that cut the frame, and I just because the 4x4 coaster blanks fit in there perfectly without cutting out the detail in parts of the oval. And then this creates the perfect shaker. I put a bunch of some flat sequins that I had from my stash, and then those papers that I used from the pad. I used the large die of the month strip die from June 2021 and cut out all of these strips. So we've got 3 different sizes. They're all uniformly sized. And I'm using my mat here. It has a 45-degree angle line that I've been lining this up with to start things. And then I just glue down these different strips. I had just done one of the strips and lined it up with the first batch. And now I'm moving it along so I can determine how wide my gap is between. I don't need it to be consistent. I just want it to be straight each time. And this saves me a little time by lining it up on the mat and then using the 45-degree angle line to help me line up each of the strips along the panel. Once I have all of these adhered again, and I am using some of the scraps from the previous cutting in order to complete this, that way I can get the most out of my strips. Now I will flip it over and just use my scissors to trim off the excess along the edge. You could use your trimmer to do this also, but I find it pretty easy to use my scissor to do the same thing. And I'm going to hang on to the bigger pieces of strips that are left. And I really like how that turned out. I am doing a little staging here. I have some more ephemera that I'm going to use. Oh, and some of the strips are coming a little bit loose. I had glued them to a lightweight piece of cardstock because it is a really lightweight pattern paper in those pads. And I like mine to have a little more heft. I've got a little bit of coaster blank behind that main panel. And I am adhering all of these pieces. For the ephemera that I pulled out of the card kit, we have this lush tropical cluster of monstera leaves and flowers. Then this little coffee shop and a little coffee to-go cup. And we're going to add a little coaster blank to just the cafe or the coffee shop. And we're going to adhere these to the frame. It is pretty busy, but I think it pulls together really well. The only thing I don't like about this card is the ink blending in the back of the shaker. And if I decided to do this again, I probably would go with just one color, not the green or a brighter pink or something to that effect. Maybe I would just leave it white or put some vellum behind it. Those are all good solutions. I took several layers of coaster blank and glued those together and stuck them behind that overlapping leaf to make sure that that is not going to get floppy. And you can see the fun shaker element. I'm taking some of the leftover strips here and adhering them to the inside of the card. I always like to carry the design through to the inside of the card, and this was the easiest way to do that. I am not taking the time to use the lines on my mat because this is a small enough area. I'm pretty confident I can line those up straight. And it is a little more forgiving when it's a diagonal edge. We'll just trim off the extra on that, and that is card number 2. How would you have done that one different? Next, we are using the Birthday Wishes vignette. I really like this one. It feels a bit jungle-ish to me, or flower garden. It has a whole lot of versatility, I think. Here I'm showing you that I am using several of the pieces. The only piece of that die set we're not using is the word part. I've taken some ephemera from the card kit again and some of the paper. Now this is a 6.5 by 4.5 inch panel because again I'm making another 5 by 7 card, and I cut that paper to 4.5 by 6 because it's a 6 by 6 pattern paper, and then I cut it down the middle and left a gap in the center. We're going to fill that with one of the leftover strips from the previous card, which happens to coordinate lovely with that striped pattern paper. I love that soft striped pattern paper. It's one of my favorite pieces from that pattern pack. Just going to snip off the excess, and then we're going to start layering things together. This Oh Happy Day was one of the pocket cards that I die cut with that center piece to create that focal point. We're just going to adhere this shimmery white detailed die that I cut out and layer it on top of the solid piece of white cardstock that I created to do the matting for this. I do think these benefit from the matting. I haven't experimented with doing it over vellum or a pattern paper, but you did see me do it over a ink blended background. Now we are just doing plain white with a shimmery white as the detail layer. And then I am going to add the Oh Happy Day, but I'm going to add a little bit of coaster blank behind that because it needs a little height. I contemplated die cutting the center out of that and raising it up and make the Oh Happy Day be recessed, but decided to make it pop out. I thought that would work better with the ephemera that I'm going to use on top of it. Speaking of which, we're going to start assembling the card. I had added some coaster blank to that main panel again, and we'll adhere that to a 5x7 card base. And then we're going to add the rest of the ephemera. Now, this particular card could be a birthday card, it could be a welcome baby card, it could be just an encouragement card for a child. It's got a very whimsical and childlike quality to it. Or just a wild and crazy friend who likes wild and crazy animal prints. Now we're going to adhere that frame, and I really like how this very elegant die set has a very versatile feel to it. It looks like a tulip on the top, or roses, or again, it could be a jungle feel. I just really like how that looked. Now the centerpiece, to me, kind of looks like a slice of bread. There's an idea. Where are we going to go with that idea? This adorable little giraffe, I am tucking partially under the pink panel and partially just the head is going to be on top of it. I love that little chameleon. He is adorable, and he's just going to hang out on the corner there. Then we have this cheetah who is parachuting in to the party. He doesn't want to miss a thing. And then we have these cute little balloons and hearts, and I'm just creating kind of a triangle visual effect up in that corner. I thought I was done, but I found this other pink cheetah and this lion head, and they had to come to the party too. So they're going inside the card, and I'm tucking that lion head just behind the cheetah body, so it looks like he's peeking around him. I think that's adorable. And here come the gems again. I think I did go a little bit overboard, but I think you'll forgive me. This card really is a little bit over the top, but that's okay. And I think the gems help keep that feeling. I just wanted this little trail of gems going up the side, and then I do believe I add them around the giraffe and the chameleon also. Sometimes more is better. I don't spend a ton of time deciding where I want to put these, but it always feels like forever when I'm doing the voiceover. How much can you talk about gems? What are your favorite gems? Do you prefer sequins or flat back gems or pearls? Or do you love Nouveau crystal drops? Or do you prefer to not use them at all? Okay, next up is the Romantic Chargeour. This one doesn't have any fancy die cut words. It's just the elements here. And I am going to create a window in this one. I had done the shimmery white detail layer and a solid white background, and I am experimenting a couple ways. Remember how I said that every time you tape them together and die cut them, it's going to be a little bit different? Well, now that I want to cut a window out of the center, I have to carefully place it. So I couldn't go over the top because I couldn't get the detailed piece back out from underneath it. So I'm going to tuck it underneath, get it lined up, and tape it down before I run it through my die cut machine. Just the background, because I don't want that detailed piece to go through the die cutting machine and get ruined. So we'll cut that out, and there we have the window. And we're going to use the dies from the June 2021 card of the month kit. They have these wonderful sentiments on a border, and we're going to use some of the gorgeous gold foil paper that comes in the kit also, and create this sentiment that we're going to put in that little window we just created. There are some ejection holes that make it easy to get these out. And I'm just going to poke out the centers of all of these letters, and it's ready to go. I love that there's a dotted or stitched element to the center line there. These make great dividers, or you can use them in a number of ways. We're going to take this center piece out and die cut a piece of vellum and put that behind this because I want to use some pattern paper. I'm going through this pad again, and I found this gold foiled number background, and we're going to use that behind the vellum. I'm measuring this to see how big a piece of paper I need to put behind it, and it looks like it's about a 3.5-inch area square. I do use that same die to make sure none of the corners will stick out. And I'm just going to add a little glue around the 4 edges and adhere that to the vellum. You're not going to see those edges where the glue is, so it doesn't matter if you use a liquid glue, and it actually doesn't really show through the vellum, even if you did want it to, or even if you did want to be able to see that area. So now I'm going to center this on the window very carefully, and I'm going to adhere this down. Now, if you did this with some other kind of foil, you wouldn't be able to bend it up the way I'm doing. This particular kind of foiled mirror cardstock that we get from Spellbinders is especially malleable, and it doesn't get crease lines or wrinkles when you bend it up like that. I'm going to use my heavy block here to help that get a little extra pressure to get adhered well to this vellum, because the foil and the vellum, both of them are not truly paper. They're both synthetic type materials, and they need a little extra time to adhere. Now, the shimmery cardstock does not need a lot of extra time. It really likes to adhere. And I'm going to outline this again, making sure to hit the inner edge and the outer edge, and then adding dots of glue in a few random places to help that all be adhered. And then we'll line this up. Now, I do struggle just a smidge with this when I'm adhering it. You're going to watch me line it all up, and it just isn't quite right. And then I realize I need to flip it because I must have had it lined up in the opposite direction when I die cut that diamond detail out of the center. And boy howdy, it lines up so much easier when you line it up the correct way. And liquid glue really gives you a chance to get that all lined up. As you can see on the side there, I was contemplating the blue, but I go with this pink background instead. Either would have worked, but I decided to go with the blue, and my plan had changed. I was going to adhere this down to a 5x7 piece of cardstock and then die cut it down with that same die that I used from Wistful Windows or Deco Bloom, but decided to cut it back down to 4.5 by 6.5, and that way I can be sure that the gap is covered by the die cut centerpiece. Then I took a piece of that mirror cardstock to match the sentiment and cut that to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and then I cut the center out with another rectangle die because you're not going to see that center, and I don't want to waste that gorgeous gold mirror cardstock. I'm adhering this to a 5x7 card base, just directly to the card base, and then the next panel has a little bit of coaster blank behind it to add a little height or a little dimension to that. I like how that looks when you're layering. I like there to be a little dimension between some of the layers. And I'll just adhere that down quickly. And then we'll finish building the rest of our main image. I've added a little bit of coaster blank behind all of that, and I'm going to make sure that's centered over the sentiment. And then we're going to take some ephemera from that same card kit. Oh, nope, I guess we're going to adhere this main part to the card panel. If you adhere things in this kind of order, kind of assemble it as you go, then it's easier to put a heavy item on top and get even pressure if you don't have all of the top layers on and you kind of build from the bottom up. So we're going to tuck in these foiled leaves that came in the kit, And I'm just kind of framing the lower edge of that. I did put a little bit of coaster blank on the tips of each of those leaves to help pop those up and add a little extra dimension. And I added a little bit of coaster blank right in the middle of that flower. We've got a whole grouping of ephemera from the pack here that I'm going to tuck on the inside. I did use a little press and seal to hold all of that together once I'd stacked it together. And I'm adhering glue behind all of those pieces. And I don't know why I thought this was a little smaller and that it would fit in this corner a little better, but there we are. That's the way it is. We're just going to add some more glue to that and get that all glued to the card. And I do have to trim off a little bit of that bouquet. Now, as I'm looking at this, I think I'm going to use that extra piece, but it just doesn't fit, so we'll move on. I'm contemplating this card and thinking, it needs just a little more, but I hadn't decided, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And then I just thought, you know what, we used all of those gems on the previous cards, let's use it again on this one. So we'll add these to the bigger holes. There's circular elements at the points of each of the points for the diamond in the center. And then I thought, that's not quite enough. Let's add these to the little filigrees in the design. And nope, that's still not quite cutting it. Let's add it to the pointy details at the top of the card. So I'm using these as kind of a gradient, the large circle to the point. I am just going from largest to smallest from that circular element. And then on the sides, I thought I would add a little more. And it just keeps growing. I don't know that I would have had to complete the bottom part. Now that I'm looking at this card after the fact, it probably would have looked good without the gems at the bottom, but I do add some to complete the same pattern from the rest of the card underneath the ephemera grouping. Let me know. What do you think? Should I have added those final details, or do you think it would have been good without those gems? Sometimes we need to back off a little bit, but I'm just going to go with it and keep adding more gems. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you lots of ideas on how to use these Beautiful Sentiment Vignette dies. These were all designed by Becca Feeken. She has a wonderful line of them, and here are some close-ups of those cards. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed to this channel, please take a moment to do that now. If you're interested in any of the products I've used in this video, check the description box below. And I will have a link to my blog post with more still photos of all of these cards in the description box also. And here are a couple of videos that I thought you might enjoy. Until next time, bye-bye.